Hey everyone, welcome to The Zest, the official podcast of Orange Coast Magazine. I'm Chelsea Ranieri, and today's guest is a singer, songwriter, musician, and filmmaker. Thank you so much for being here today, Matt Costa.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I'm so excited to get to talk with you. I remember when Mr. Pitiful came out, it was like the soundtrack to my high school. Like all my friends had that song on like repeat. So this is very exciting.
Cool. All right. Well, that's my song. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you grew up in Huntington, is that right?
Yeah. That's where I grew up in Orange County for the most part, and then I finished high school in Huntington Beach.
Nice. That's where I went to school too, Huntington High.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, small world. Well, what were you like growing up? Were you like always into music, or did that come later?
I was always into music. I played trumpet in the school band.
No way.
And then, yeah. So I played trumpet, and then I had a guitar, but I was just kind of fiddling around. I'd learned the beginning of songs and things, and I never really thought that it could be a profession. You know, it was just music that I did just because I enjoyed making sounds. You know, really didn't matter if I had like a real instrument or not. I would just, even now I can find like a pot or a pan or a bottle or something to bang on, and it kind of gives me the fix, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Well, I read that you wanted to go professional into skating. What first drew you into the sport?
Well, I think when I was real young, there was like, I've kind of deduced it over the years. Like when I was real young, I played baseball. And so when I was like 9 years old, you could do like sell candy bars and stuff to raise money.
Yeah.
So I sold enough candy bars to like get a big prize. And the prize that I wanted was a skateboard. So I got my first skateboard through like a baseball like fundraiser when I was 9 years old. And I think I wanted the skateboard because I liked Bart Simpson and I liked the Ninja Turtles, and they both skateboarded. So it was like those things that kind of like probably informed it, you know, because I was like, they're cool and they skateboard, so that I want to try that out. And so I got a skateboard. It wasn't a very good one. I mean, it was functional, it worked, but it was brand new, and I don't even know. It was probably like it was just like a kind of an off-brand one. But the kid down the street from me had like an old one that was all beat up. And so he was a little bit better than me. And so I thought his was better. So I traded him this brand new skateboard for this old beat up one. And then my parents like saw the garage. In the garage, they were like, where's your skateboard? What's that skateboard? And I said, I traded it to the guy down the street because this one's cooler. And they were like, why did you do that one? This one's all old and messed up. And I was like, yeah, but I think I can skate better on it. So that's kind of how I got into it. And then I think as far as just like, you know, eventually I got like a newer board that was like more of like a professional board. I mean, whatever. Like it was like a new school shape, and then you could do proper tricks on it. I got it from like a legitimate shop. And then, and I kind of just became like, kind of just fascinated with it, and I really like going out to finding street spots and then filming stuff with my friends. And so that was the cool part, is you could go out and just make, with like an old VHS camera, you'd go out and like film stuff and then put it together with your friends and make these little mixtapes, you know? So,
yeah. Did you have any like favorite spots in Orange County that you used to frequent?
I mean, I actually at the high school, there was a skate park there, you know?
Yeah.
I liked that. I mean, that was pretty cool. It was a legendary spot. Like a lot of people would practice there. It was like a good training ground because you'd get tricks there. And then once you had it down, then you could take it to like a real handrail or something. So there were a lot of spots, you know, a lot of legendary spots in Southern California. But I think I frequented that the most because it was basically a spot to get all the tricks down. And everyone would meet there. So you meet there, and then you would go to the actual spots.
Oh, that's so fun. I actually had Ed Templeton on, and he talked about that spot too.
Oh, nice. I was, actually, he's a legend. He's a legend.
Yeah. Well, you ended up having a injury from skating. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I did. It's funny because I work with this like I do music and do some things with a company called Warsaw, it's a brand new shoe company. It's Jamie Thomas's skateboarding, like his new shoe company. And so he actually, Ed did a collaboration with him for the first launch. And
No way.
yeah, so I was watching this preview of it, working out some music for it. And Ed was talking about how he shattered his leg a little bit. He was,
Mhm.
later in his career. But I had the similar thing. I was 19 years old and I just graduated, but I had also done like independent studies. Like I think I was at Huntington Beach High School. And then for the last year, I just was like, I'm going to go skate around all day. I don't want to be in the classroom. So then I got I filled out all the papers and just got my diploma that way. And so I started getting some sponsors and stuff, and that's all I did. And then one day I was in like inland in the city of industry. You find these random places to skate, and it was at this high school, and I was coming down this big ledge, and then just my leg exploded, just compound fracture into like tons of pieces,
Oh.
and so I was laying on the ground, and then you take falls all the time, and even
Mhm.
now, like I've kind of gotten back into skating, but so when I fall and I'm okay, it's a nice little wake up and I feel alive and I'm like, oh, that's good. And so I was used to it, but then I like laid on the ground and I was like, something doesn't feel right. And then my friend was like, don't get up, don't get up. Something's wrong. And so I looked down at my leg and it was like looking back at me and then,
Oh.
yeah. And so then I was kind of out for what I thought would be a couple months, but it was about 2 years.
Oh my
And so
God.
then, yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah.
And so during that time, then I started, then I couldn't even, I mean, thinking about skating again was like nearly impossible because when my leg healed up eventually after like it re-broke again because there was like screws in there, but the screws weren't holding it. And then
Oh
they told me
no.
I could walk on it and it re-broke. So skateboarding was out of the question. And during that time, then I started just playing music again and writing songs on the guitar.
I would
And
be so mad at, oh, sorry, go on.
no. And so, yeah, like being able to walk, I was grateful for. Like skateboarding aside,
Yeah.
I mean, I love skateboarding because it was all that I knew, and it taught me so much. And I still like I would go to the skate park with my crutches on and like try tricks with just like my one leg and that. But once I could actually, walk around a little bit, like I didn't even know how to use my leg, so it took me a long time to build up the courage to like even, yeah, to just put pressure on it, and then it was really challenging to build it all back up. So,
Yeah. I would be so
and
mad if the doctor said you could walk and then you re-break it again.
I mean,
Ah.
I think he did the best he could. It was like, I
Yeah.
mean, it was my fault. I broke it really bad. So it was just like it was really messed up. And but I didn't believe it because I was visiting my girlfriend in Northern California at the time. It was around the holidays, and so we were doing some like Christmas shopping with her family, and there was some outlets and we were walking around it. They're like, the doctor had told me before that trip, he's like, yeah, put some pressure on it. The screws will hold it. It will stimulate the bone growth. And then so I was like, all right, cool. We'll go walk around the outlets. And so I did. And by the end of the outlet day, I was like, something doesn't feel right. And it was popping and clicking around.
Oh.
And I went to the hospital up there after like it was like midnight or something, and I was like, something's not right. It doesn't feel good. And like, okay, let's check it out. Go to the hospital. And the doctors at the hospital were like, yeah, your leg's broken. And I was like, no, I mean, I know it's broken. It's been broken for a long time. And they're all, no, it's like re-broken. I was like, no. And they're like, yeah. So then I called my doctor the next day. I was like, yeah, I walked on the leg. They said it's re-broken. He's like, no, it's not. It's impossible. And I was like, well, he's like, come in a week from now. And I was like, what do you want me to do in the meantime? He's like, just keep it in the brace. It'll be fine. So I schedule an appointment, go to the doctor, hoping that it'll be like not rebroken and that they were just confused. And then he checks it out and he's like, yeah, it's rebroken. So I go, what does that mean? He's like, well, we got to cut you open again. And then we're going to take the
Oh.
screws out and put a plate in there. And so then I had to have another surgery and, all that stuff. So it was a long road to just being able to kind of have a leg again. And so it made me really grateful when I could even walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously. Well, you'd mentioned you started like kind of writing songs during this time. Like what triggered that in you?
I don't know. I mean, I think I had gotten an acoustic guitar that was like a month or two before. So okay, so the thing is that like I had this like I guess I don't know if I maybe I'd do it in a way, but so just like I traded that skateboard when I was a
Mhm.
kid for the other skateboard, then when I was skateboarding, I ran out of money to get like a new pair of shoes and a board because you blow through them like every month, they just wear out. Um, and then I had an electric guitar that was like
Mhm.
$100 from when I was like right when I was on 12 or 13. I got an electric guitar just to like learn the beginnings of like Nirvana songs or Smashing
Mhm.
Pumpkins and stuff. So I got that guitar, and then it was like the thing I had that was the most valuable. So I talked to this friend of mine who was a pro skateboarder, and I was like, "I'll trade you my guitar for a skateboard and a pair of shoes," because he got them for free. He was like, "Okay, good deal." So I gave him the guitar. I got the shoes and the skateboard. It wore out, you know. Um, and then I was out of a guitar and out of shoes and a skateboard. And so eventually, then like when I had like I had wanted to play guitar. I just would always borrow them from a friend, you know, and I never had my own. And then when I was like 19, my dad was like, "All right, you graduated. We'll get you an acoustic guitar for your birthday for graduation." He's like, "But the one thing is, he's like, you can't sell it no matter whatever you do," because he was just like, "I know you're going to need money and you're going to want to sell it." He's like, "You can't sell it." And um, so then I got the guitar, and then I was like, "Oh, I got to learn some songs." So I had my trumpet that I had. I was like, "Well, this thing's valuable." So I traded that for like a Rolling Stone songbook. And so anything that I had that was valuable, I was just like, I was hawking it because I needed the money. So then I sold that trumpet and I got a Rolling Stone songbook. And then so I would just sit around and listen to records and figure those songs out.
Now, is that where you're like kind of, wait, I don't actually, God, this is be embarrassing, but is that the 60s influence? Is that where they came from? The
I
Rolling
mean,
Stones?
yeah. Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. Yeah. I mean, they did stuff from the
I was like, is
60s
that
and
the right thing?
70s. And
Okay,
I mean,
good.
they're still a band, you know? So, I mean, I
Yeah,
guess
yeah.
it's like contemporary, but the stuff I was learning was from the 60s.
You got that from the songs that you were writing, or had you always kind of had an interest in 60s music?
You know, I pieced it together with, I think that, so when I was like a kid in my like
Mhm.
in the back of my parents' car. My parents, so like they would listen to they they were like teenagers. When were they teenagers? Maybe like 50s and 60s and stuff. So my parents are like 80 right now. They had me a little bit later. And so they listened to the oldies station. The oldies station played like 50s and 60s music. So they weren't really into 80s music
Mhm.
because it was like they were in this like they were a little bit past that as far as what they were into. So the music from that era was what they'd listened to in the car. So I think that kind of stuck with me. Just hearing those sounds, it was what I was familiar with.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. That makes total sense. Well, how did you start to work with No Doubt's guitarist?
Right? I know.
That's so
Um,
cool.
it is cool. Yeah. Well, Tom is we became really good friends. And so his name's Tom Dumont.
Mhm.
And I was, so once I started writing songs and stuff, I would do them on like, I just kind of thought of it in the same way that I made those original skate tapes,
Mhm.
just like from VHS to VHS. And so then I would do the same thing. Like I had this little cassette recorder, and then I had like two CD burner, and then
Uh-huh.
I would just like burn it onto a CD and then make copies of that. And so then I gave them out to some friends. And at the time, like what was happening? I think some people, oh, this is what happened. Some people who were working at the company Ruka, um, they had got a hold of it. And
What?
yeah, it was early on when they were just in like a little small, like a really small, like garage warehouse
Mhm.
kind of thing. And they had a couple shirts and they had just started doing stuff. Um, and so they were like, "Oh, we like this," you know. I think I popped in there because I had a friend who was doing some work with them. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, this is Matt. He made that music." And they're like, "Oh, that's pretty cool. Like, you know, what do you doing? And I was like, I don't know. I just make it in my room. And so they kind of were like, kind of kept asking me to come around. They're like, oh, that's sweet. Well, yeah, you should stop by again. So I stopped by like once or two, like one or two more times. And then one of the times I was in there, there was this bearded guy, and he was the husband of one of the women that worked there. And he started talking to me about music. And Pat, the owner, was like, oh yeah, you should talk with Tom. He plays music too. Maybe you guys could do something together. And he's like, oh, how you recording? I was like, yeah, I was telling him my whole process. And then he left. And then Pat Tenore was like, oh yeah, that's the guitar player for No Doubt. I was like, oh, that's pretty crazy. And then like 2 days later, I'd seen them on the Super Bowl, and he was wearing a Ruka shirt. And I'd given him my phone number, and I was watching the Super Bowl at my parents' house, and I was like, oh, I met that guy. I gave him I gave him my little demo CD, and he has my phone number. And then a couple of days later, he called me up and was like, hey, I was busy doing this thing, but I listened to your stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And he's like, but I listened to your stuff, and do you have any more? It'd be cool if you wanted to come over, and we could I want to test out recording some stuff with you. And so No Doubt was on a hiatus at the time, so we had some spare time. And then and so we started working on a song, and then he was like, oh, come back, we'll do another one, or we'll finish this one. And so that happened week after week. And then every week I was like, well, man, I gotta write a new song, so I have a new song to show and record. But we couldn't record a new song every week. I went back, so I had stockpiled lots and lots of songs. Not all of them were good, I feel but eventually I'd written hundreds of songs, and then that got narrowed down into my first record that was called Songs We Sing. And there was an EP that we did before that too. Yeah.
Wow. So how has your songwriting process evolved over time from when you first started to now?
Well, when I first started, I think that's the thing that I always try to keep in mind is that I was always trying to write beyond my own abilities. So maybe I tried to write a song instead of learning how to play the guitar and then being okay, I can play this, so then I'm going to write this type of song. I would write the type of song to be able to play the guitar like that. And so, and similarly now, I think when I want to write a certain style of music, if it's something that's more synthesizer based, or if it's kind of has some influences from different places around the world, then I think, okay, I want to learn how to do that. And so the song has always been the thing that's driven me to become a better musician. Instead of being a better musician and then trying to write music, it's gone the opposite way. The song has been the catalyst for being a musician. So I think that's always informed the songs being first and foremost.
Yeah. So how did you guys pick and choose which songs went on your first album? I feel like that'd be so hard.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they rise to the top, the ones that that kind of stick with you. We started putting out some stuff I think I had my first website, and I put a couple songs on there for free, some versions that were rougher than they became. But one of them was a song called Sunshine, and then that song, people started liking it, and then some people put it on. I think some people put it on some compilations, and so we're like, oh, that one's got to go on the record. And I didn't like the recording of it because at the end of it, their phone rang and stuff. So it was in the recording, there were all these little things that were kind of the charming, that I look back now and I'm like, oh, that's charming. But I was like, oh, it's got to be professional. We have to cut out all the noise and stuff. So I did a version that was a little bit, it was the same, but it just didn't have phone ring in it. And then, I think there were just certain ones that that just felt you can feel it when a song's doing the thing. I also have always just never really dwelled on things too much, because I feel like that's one of the things that I think it's great to really be thoughtful with the stuff you want to put out, but if you're thoughtful with it for 10 years, you could have written maybe 8 records during that time. And I think you'll learn more than being like, you'll learn more about songwriting and your relationship to putting things out into the world than you will hoarding something and then never putting those ideas out because you want it to be perfect. Because what is perfect? Sometimes the most perfect stuff it has the most imperfections in it. So,
Oh, I love that. That's a good point. Well, in 2005, you opened on Jack Johnson's summer tour with bands like Modest Mouse and Oasis. What was this experience like? That sounds so fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was a trip. I mean, I'd done like shows locally, like I'd done shows all around Orange County and LA, and I'd done like a little run up the coast by myself. Actually, Tom and I took a mini tour with just the two of us with our guitars, like all the way up to Seattle.
No way.
And yeah, and that was early on. And so we did that, and then I'd played at like the House of Blues and stuff in Anaheim. And my first show was at a place called Hoagie Bar Michaels, which was right. It's not there anymore. I think it's called Jack's. It's right by John Wayne Airport.
Oh, what? That's so cool.
And so I played there. I opened for my friend's hardcore band because there wasn't really. I didn't really know that many people who were like going out and playing like folky music, but they were playing music, and I said, yeah, I got some songs, and like, we'll jump on this show. So I did, and that was my first gig. And so I'd played all these different kinds of shows, and I'd done stuff in LA at clubs and clubs down here. But then I got a call from Jack, and I had known of his music because I was a fan of Ben Harper. And so they were like, oh, Jack has heard some of your songs, he wants to meet you and, maybe, do something. So we went to this like Mexican restaurant, and he kind of was like, yeah, I want to, would you want to go on tour? I love the record that is songs we sing. I don't think we hadn't officially released it. I think maybe I just released it independently, because before I put it out through Brushfire Records, which is Jack's label, I had done an independent release of it. And so I think he had heard that recorded version, and he was like, oh, I want to take you on tour. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, I've done some shows before. That sounds like a cool idea. And so he kind of gave me the rundown. And that was at the time he put out his third record, which was called In Between Dreams. And so I think he went from doing theaters, like, which I'd played at like maybe 1 or 2 theaters, or House of Blues. I was like, oh, those are the biggest shows you could do. It was like 500, 600 people. And so I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I've done that before, I guess. And so then we show up on this tour, and they're like outdoor sheds for like 15,000 people. And I was like, oh, this is not expecting. So yeah, and we did that and played some legendary places like the Greek Theater up in Berkeley.
I love the Greek. Oh wait, never mind.
And LA too, yeah.
Yeah, the Greek one in LA, yeah.
And then eventually we toured all around the world too, all through Europe, and then with Oasis and stuff too. I did a whole tour in Canada, and then we hit it off really well. So then we did a US tour, and then same with Modest Mouse too, which I think before I'd even done a show with them, I had like Isaac had invited me up to Isaac Brock, the singer, had invited me up to Portland, and I think I jumped on stage and was just like shaking some maracas or something, which is cool because I learned their music through some old skate videos too. So basically, yeah, that was really fun to be involved in. And again, too, like playing those shows, I mean, I never really would have expected that, because a lot of the music that I liked, I mean, those shows and the amount of people that showed up were like exceeding any expectations I could have ever imagined. So
yeah, God, 15,000 people. I can't even imagine. Well, Mr. Pitiful came out just 2 years later after your tour. And this was used in I Love You Man, the Youth in Revolt trailer, Marmaduke, and more. Take me back to that year. What was it like for a song to just like blow up like that?
I mean, when that stuff happens, I felt like it's hard to have a real perspective on it, It's especially when you're so close to something. And when there's lots of momentum behind something, it's kind of like when you're, when you're climbing up a mountain or something like that, you don't really look back down. You're
Mhm.
just like, when you do, you're like, well, I'm pretty high up. But if you keep, you keep looking forward, then you're working your way up it. And that's kind of what I felt like. I didn't really ever take a moment to look back down. And then I think, over time, I started to see the more like the effects of like it reaching people, like even this conversation here, when you're like,
Mhm.
oh, that song was
Yeah.
listening to it all the time. I'm like, whoa, I don't even know that until now. That's pretty cool. So,
Yeah. What inspired that song?
well, I had an old piano. Well, I didn't have a piano actually. That's what it was. And so I thought I also didn't know like how much a piano costs, because I was like, yeah, the pianos are in everyone's houses, they can't be that expensive. So then I'd always liked the sound of pianos. I like the way that they fill up a room,
Mhm.
and I like that you can just kind of, yeah, I just love the sound of a piano. And so I was like, I need to get a piano. I need to get a piano. And so I went to like the piano shop, and this is it was when I was living in Sacramento I was living there for like a year or so.
Mhm.
Um, and then I went to the piano shop, and then I realized that pianos were like way more expensive than I could have ever imagined. So it was like $50,000 and like
Oh, what?
$100,000. And I was like, what? And then, the lower price ones were still just more money than I'd ever even seen in my entire life. So I was like, well, I guess I'm not going to get a piano. So then I look in the back corner, and then there was like this really old beat up piano. Um, and I was like, well, how much is that one? He's like, oh, that one? He's like, $100. And I was like,
Oh.
$100. I was like, all right, cool. So then I was like, I'll take it. $100. I can do that. So I spent $100 on this piano. And then like, I had my girlfriend's dad like drive up with his truck, and we loaded it in there and like took it back to the house. Um, and it was all beat up, like the black keys, like the wood was coming through, and then like all the keys were chipped, but it could
Oh.
still kind of keep a tune. But it was a pretty pitiful piano. And so I just sort of like banged away on that thing for like a couple days. And by the end of those days, then and the place that I was into had these like hollow wood floors. So it was like the whole room was just really, I was really feeling it, and I was really in it. And, yeah, so that was the idea about that song. Tom was actually he was really concerned. He thought the song was about him because he did have a white picket fence. And I was like, no, man, it's not about you. Don't worry.
Oh my God, that's so funny. It reminds me of like the Charlie Brown Christmas tree moment, like seeing like the sad piano in the corner and
Yep,
taking it
yep,
home.
yep. Yeah, that's it.
um,
It really was. I put a lot of life, and I moved that piano. Um, I put a lot of life back into that piano, and it like came with me a bunch. Like I moved it back down to Huntington when I was living on Third and Orange downtown, and then I took
no
it
way.
from there to to another place I was living in, Costa Mesa, and eventually I'd moved it so many times and like squeezed it through like physical spaces that it wasn't even possible. And eventually I was like, you know what? I think I'm done with this piano. And so I like, when I moved out of one place, the guy who came and took the place over, I was like, do you want a piano? And he's like, yeah, I'd love a piano. I was like, you can have this piano. And and so I just left it with him.
Oh, well, at least it found a new home.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so in 2020, you released your album Yellow Coat, and I read that this song was like letters to yourself. So, what kind of
Uh-huh.
prompted the creation of that?
Well, more like, I guess it's kind of one of those things where, mm, yeah, I was going through a really hard time,
Mm.
so I was like going through a really big, like a really, whatever, like breakups and stuff. Those things
Yeah.
happen when you're going through them, especially really big ones. You don't really, the, you, I actually I didn't want to write music. I didn't really think about like, I didn't really even want to, everyone's like, oh, you're going to write great music. You're having a great breakup. It's going to be incredible. That's when the best stuff comes. And I was like, you know what? Like, I would rather not have a broken heart than write good
Yeah.
songs, for real. I was like, and they're like, but you're a songwriter. And I'm like, for real? Like, no, I don't want that, And
Yeah.
so I basically just I kind of started writing sort of like things to myself that, in the, like more like a future self, and
Mhm.
in a way that would be kind of like letters to myself in the future, like of ways instead of, I also didn't want to do it in a way where it was feeling sorry for myself or something or negative, but I wanted to write
Yeah.
things that were healing and that were like that would condone healing and change. Almost like I realized too in all my years of writing songs, they became like, you're manifesting something, so I'd write this song about something and then a couple years later I would live it, and I realized that
Huh.
probably my subconscious was just like working it out, and then I just manifested it. So instead of writing something really that would take me further down into a hole, I felt like writing something that could help me transcend that and climb out. And 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 I also didn't want to release that because it wasn't for the public. It was just for myself. And then but my I had some friends at the time who were at this label that I'd started working with, and then another friend of mine who's also my music manager was like, have you got anything? You got any music? Or we got to, it's been like couple years. You got to put something out, it'd be good for you to put something out. And I was like, no, 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 I don't. And I just said I didn't have anything. And like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I kept
Mhm.
saying, no, I don't have anything. And eventually they're like, you have to have something. And I was like, well, okay, yeah, I have these songs, but I didn't even think of them as like something that anyone else wanted to listen to. And so I sat in a room with them and played them for them. I was like, this is what I've been working on, but it's, I don't really want to do anything with it. And they're like, this is actually, you need to put this out. And so then they're like, it's really good. You should put this out. And so then after like a little while of thinking about it, like I don't know, a couple months or something,
Mhm.
and I was like, all right, yeah, I guess maybe I'll put them out. And so I did like, then I had but I also like, I was kind of like, I wrote them in sort of a state where like I didn't really ever feel like they were going to be released, and I didn't really have any expectations for them. When I wrote the ideas down, like again, like the expectations had been met. So I wasn't too precious with them. So when it came time to record them, I felt really like free in a state of where I could be really present in the moment of the actual, the final recordings of them. And so, yeah, eventually that, I recorded them, and then that became the Yellow Coat record.
Wow, I love that story. It sounds incredibly like vulnerable. And also manifesting works. I did that last year for instead of
Yeah.
New Year's resolutions. And I went back and looked and I was like, oh my God, it actually like these all happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had forgotten about them and then it came true.
Yeah, that stuff does work. And I think that
Mhm.
like as being like a being everyone has creative potential, And I think that it's just a matter of like uh acknowledging that, and where do you want to focus it, just because like, one of the outlets that I've obviously put so much of it into in my life has been music. And it's a very like, it's interesting because, you write the song, it's documented, and you have this thing. And then when you start to realize that for better or for worse, sometimes you're living these things out, I was like, man, you know what? I should really. So now when I sit down to write a song, like instead of sometimes just writing something of like what I'm more conscious of my feelings and then what I turn them into, instead of just like sulking in them, because otherwise you'll be doomed to like relive that again and again. And so then I was like,
Yeah.
so this year too, even like on aside from that, yeah, I've got some good New Year's resolutions, which, you got to put those out there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, okay, so you've done film scoring and now you've also gotten into film making. So, you had a film come out with Rourke in 2022. So, how did this project come about?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that one. Well, I had started doing some music for like for some of their trips. Like they'd done stuff in Russia, and they'd done stuff in
Whoa.
where else had they gone? They travel all around the world. In India, they had done some stuff there, and they had done some stuff in they'd done trips in Vietnam, and they'd done a bunch of different places. And so they had, I think down at the coffee shop, I was there one day, and the owner, Ryan, we had crossed paths before, but he was like, "Oh, hey, you're living in the neighborhood. Um, what are you up to?" He started talking, and he was like, "Oh, you should do some music sometime for one of the trips." And so I started doing like some just arranging and writing music after the fact. They go on these
Mhm.
trips, and he's like, "No, you got to come out sometime." So they would call me up and be like, "Yeah, we're going to India in like 3 days. Can you go?" And I was like,
Oh.
"That's a little short. I can't do that." And so I was like, I don't think I had a valid passport at the time, so it would take me longer to get that. But
Mhm.
then eventually, he's like, "Okay." They gave me like at least a couple months notice, and they're like, "We're going to go to Oaxaca. Do you want to come down there? And we also want you to like." I had done some more video work, music video work for my own music videos for the Yellow Coat record. And they were like, "Oh yeah, that stuff's pretty cool. Would you want to do some video work when you're down there too?" So that's how it came about. I went down there, and my friend Jordan Lovelace and I co-directed a film, and then I wrote a bunch of the music down there, and ended up making a whole record based on the experience down there.
God,
It's
how
called
fun. And then, oh,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Oh, it's
No, you
called
say it
Donde
because I
los
can't pronounce it.
Hermanos. Yeah, yeah,
Perfect.
yeah. Don't. And that's not like I think it's just more, it translates to, for better, in like, for lack of being proper, it translates to where the earthquakes. And so it's like
Oh,
they have these really big they have really big earthquakes down in Oaxaca specifically. And so I just thought, like, why does this happen there? What is the, like,
yeah.
there has to be some legends behind it and some actual truth behind what, what the stories are behind the indigenous people down there and what they believe. And so with that in mind, then I started going down this whole path and started discovering all of these truths. And basically it comes down to being like, I talk with some elders there, and they were saying, like, in this like really sacred area, I was like, why are you safe here? And they're like, because down in the big cities, man has like built over all of nature, and the earth shakes so violently because it's nature trying to reclaim the earth back to itself.
Whoa.
He's like, we're one with nature, so we're actually really close to it, and we're safe. And so that's kind of like, I think that's the general sentiment of it, is kind of being that, you know, having that connectedness to nature. And I think that has like something that has always been like a through line and stuff that I've been discovering at this part of my creative ventures with film and music.
Yeah. And then you also had a music and film experience called Explorations of Sight and Sounds that came out last year. And that has 3 pieces of music, a live concert, and a collection of films that you produced. So, how did this
Yeah.
come together?
Yeah. Yeah. And so these first ones were kind of an evolution of that. One was
Mhm.
affiliated with Rourke. The first one, we had gone to Sardinia, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, it was cool. It was really, it was beautiful.
Yeah,
You should go. You should
I
go.
know.
Yeah. Water is really blue, and like you can do some nice diving, and there's all sorts of trails and like rock climbing, really beautiful, in a town called Ulasai. Just above Ulasai, there's these like beautiful canyon that's got like every scale of climbing that you could that you can imagine, from beginners to extreme experts.
Wow, that's so cool. That's a dream.
Yeah, it is a dream. When I was there, I got home and I was like, was
Yeah.
that real? I don't know if it was. But so I shot it all on film too. That one I started gradually moving more into doing stuff just like on 16 millimeter film. Just because I just liked the process of it, and I like that the actual texture that the all the visuals have when you get it back.
Mhm.
Um, it's really inspiring for me to to write music to. It's kind of like picking up an old guitar or something. It's got all those nuances in it that no matter how hard you try, it's just like it only comes out with that. And also too, it forces you to really um be intentional and also be
Yeah.
really, intentional in a moment when you're shooting with it. And also you don't know what it looks like. So then you're like, maybe that all was a dream, and you get it back and you get the 3-week footage. You're like, yeah, it was a dream. I've documented it. Certainly. And then there, it's just something that keeps going and giving back because the footage looks really beautiful and it's inspiring to write music over. So that's how that came about, was like taking my camera, taking the sounds that were inspired by a place and exploring what would be, the sights and the sounds. And that's kind of evolved into something that the most recent one is California based, which focuses on all the indigenous cultures from, well, not all, it it doesn't focus on all of them, but
Uh-huh.
it focuses on several, but it basically is trying to gain acknowledgement for all of them. And by kind of taking these by going to these places, uh there's like a powwow that we went to in Redding in Northern California. We stopped in the Owens Valley, which is traditionally called Payahunadu, and then
Mhm.
also right down here in uh, San Juan Capistrano, at where the missions are at.
Oh, yeah.
I became friends with an elder, Adelia Sandoval, who is part of the Juaneño, um, uh, the Juaneño band of Indians, and um, so I learned a lot from that process, and for me too, I think it's the same thing where it's like um, the most compelling thing is that I'm growing and learning within these experiments, and then also sharing that. So
Yeah. Oh, that all sounds so amazing. Well, do you have anything coming up in 2025 that listeners should keep an eye out, or any projects you're currently working on that you're excited for?
yeah, well, the explorations, I'll continue to be doing more of those.
Mhm.
So there's going to be new versions of that, which will take us all around the who knows where next, but it's going to take us probably around the globe. Um, Definitely around the globe. Uh, can't name any of what those are specifically yet. And then doing some stuff with Jamie, as I mentioned in the beginning of
Mhm.
this, with his new shoe company Warsaw, doing original music. Like, I think in the next couple weeks we're going to release something. I did a tour where he played in skate shops. He was out there meeting people, and then I was making music that I was recording live in the skate shops from like Denver to Delaware. And so I have all of that recorded. I did some video of it too, us skating in Philadelphia and Kansas, and all the music was recorded live on location too.
Oh,
So,
cool. And then
and
also,
written
are
on location.
you that's so impressive. I can't even imagine. Well, are you also curating the lineup for the Coast Film Festival in Laguna this year?
I did last year, and then
Huh.
this next year, yeah, I think
Oh,
they had
cool.
asked me to come back and do that again. So yeah, I would yeah, I think that's in the works, and then also doing some collaborative film stuff with like a legendary photographer named Henry Diltz, who shot a lot of he shot a lot of bands in the '60s and '70s, but like Joni Mitchell and the Doors,
Oh, whoa.
and the Eagles and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and all those folks. He was um, I'm going to do another documentary that involves him, uh, a local band here in Laguna called the Great North Special, who are friends of mine, and a couple other things, but basically about just like, basically about how these, well, it's still in the works right now, actually, because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have a
yeah.
basic idea of what it's going to be, but also I think that stuff I also like to let it be open enough to unfold. So, I'll
Okay.
say maybe it's called Quantum Vibrations, but it can still change. So,
Ooh, exciting. Well, we are coming to the end of our time, but before I let you go, I have three final questions for you that we call the Thoughtful Three. So, first,
okay.
what advice do you have for aspiring musicians?
Okay. Yeah. Uh, I would say, I would say, let your expectations be met when you finish writing the song.
Mm.
And I don't mean recording the song. I mean just writing the song. If it happens to be that it's the recording of the song is when you finish writing it, but when you're happy with the writing of the song, then I would say let that be the peak of your expectations, because then from there on out, then they will only be exceeded.
Yeah. That's good
Yeah.
advice. And then what would you tell your younger self knowing what you know now?
I'd say, oh man, let me think about this. I could give a really like crazy, like, meta answer, but I'll try to answer it very like, I would say, man, I that's, I don't know. It's, I guess, because it's hard to think about, like, I would say, just, you're going to be all right. Keep going. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That's nice. Simple. And
Yeah,
then
really.
lastly, yeah. What is a habit or routine that you feel has helped you become successful?
A habit or routine that has helped me become successful. Well, hmm. I like to, I would say meditation. Meditation has
Mm.
helped me just become like, success is, whatever people's
Yeah.
version of success is. But I think that it's helped me to, uh, curb bad habits, and whatever that those are, because it has helped me to become more, thoughtful in the things I do every day, whatever that is, whether it's, you know, talking to the people, my family members, and stuff like that, interpersonal relationships, and then my own relationship with my creative process too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, and that doesn't mean like, I think, it can be something where, if you have like whatever your form of meditation is, maybe it's prayer for some, maybe it's like it is more of an Eastern thing. I meditated before I even knew it when I was making music. That's kind of like I would fall into those states, and I realized that's what I was searching for, and I was like, oh, wait a second, that's what this is. And these are those moments that I wait for. And when you go see music and you see a great show, you see a great symphony, you see a great rock band, sometimes you fall into that state. You're meditating,
Yeah.
whether or not, whatever you want to call it. But I think being aware of that has helped me, and then being in that space then it just helps me to be more, of a better person to the people around me.
Yeah. God, that's, I really like that perspective of it, right? Not just like necessarily sitting and trying to not to think about anything. Cause I do get into those meditative states in different activities, but it's not necessarily sitting down and intentionally meditating. So I do like that.
Yeah,
That's
totally. Yeah, you can. I mean, I think that's what when I realized that's what I was doing. I was like, oh,
mm-hmm.
I've been doing it all along, but now I'm aware of it, and so then you can kind of, you realize it's not unattainable. It's not something that it feels
Yeah.
like you have to like, you got to try to do. Because you're probably doing it the best when you're not trying to do it.
So true. God, well, thank you so much for doing this. It was so great getting to talk with you and meet you. This is so fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks.
Of course.